SLT Fibre and experience the power of fibre technology. Sri Lanka's only super fast internet connection. SLT Fibre. Call 1212 now.
Tonight, what didn't happen? Presidential hopeful Gotabaya Rajapaksa pledges to fulfill the Cardinal's request. Getting better. Sri Lanka is removed from the grey list of the International Terror Financing Watchdog. Setback for Johnson. Parliamentarians back Brexit deal delay. All these stories and much more coming your way on First at 9 this Saturday, the 19th of October 2019.
Fair and Lovely Men ගෑවට පස්සේ marks අඩු වෙලා fairness වැඩි වෙලා.
Marks අඩු කරලා ඔයාගේ fairness standard එක වැඩි කරගන්න. Fair and Lovely Men anti-marks cream.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very good evening to you and welcome to First at 9 on AdaDerana 24, Sri Lanka's news channel. I'm Derana Chang. Now on to your top story tonight. Presidential candidate of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna Gotabaya Rajapaksa is confident of leading the way to bring the change needed in the current political culture by ending corruption and vengeance-driven politics. Inking a memorandum of understanding with the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, the former Defence Secretary pledged not to break the trust placed in him by the SLFP.
The Western Province Aesthetic Resort hosted the official inking of the Memorandum of Understanding between the Sri Lanka Freedom Party and the presidential candidate of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, this morning. Senior parliamentarians representing both parties were seen present during the occasion. Presidential candidate Gotabaya Rajapaksa signed the agreement, while General Secretary Dayasiri Jayasekara placed his signature on behalf of the SLFP.
Gotabaya Rajapaksa
is not running for presidency as a politician of a political party. For the first time in the history, we see a professional contesting for the presidency upon the request of national forces. 70 years later, people of this country are disgusted with politics and politicians. This is a time where we are in search of a figure who can create a better future for this country. That is the void you have to fill.
I will
not do anything which will damage the trust you had in me, not only during the election, but in a future government as well. We have agreed to policies based on ensuring safety in this country, reviving the economy and on development, as well as serving the people. So I request all SLFPers to join hands with me if you have taken an alternative decision. All of us agree that we need a change in this political culture. We should end corruption as well as politics driven by vengeance. I will provide you the leadership to bring that change.
මම සුබ අනාගතයක් වේවායි ප්‍රාර්ථනා කරනවා. තෙරුවන් සරණයි.
SLPP's presidential candidate Gotabaya Rajapaksa today promised to appoint a presidential commission of inquiry to probe the Easter Sunday attacks and bring the culprits responsible to book. Now, there have been calls for the appointment of a presidential commission in the aftermath of the attack. Speaking at a rally held in Negombo this evening, the presidential hopeful also pledged never to let terrorism and extremism raise their ugly heads once more in Sri Lanka.
An election rally organised by the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna was worked off in Kiribatkura today under the auspices of its presidential candidate Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Opposition leader Mahinda Rajapaksa too attended the rally.
විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ ගම්පහ දිස්ත්‍රික්කය
Gampaha district is known as a district which gives prominence to knowledge. Under our government, we will make this district a centre of knowledge. This is also a location where tourism can be developed. We will develop tourism under Tourism Development Program to the tune of $10 billion. We also have plans to increase tourist arrivals to 7 million per year. We will also assist in developing businesses in close proximity to airports.
අපි වර්ධනය කරන්නට ක්‍රියා කරනවා. ඕරස ආනාධාරය කෘෂිකාර්මික කටයුතු වලට දෙනවා කිව්වම
When we pledge to provide relief for fertilizer for agriculture, they say that we're only going to provide this for paddy. The UNP didn't even think of the agri-sector until we mentioned it. During our time, we produced so much paddy that this government stocked it at the Mattala airport and we thought it was exported. Now we have to wait until we get rice from overseas.
අපිට එවනකම් අපි අතපාගෙන ඉන්නවා.
Another election rally, meanwhile, was organised in Ragama today.
We will reinstate our intelligence units under a leadership of ours and do what is needed to strengthen our security to give you a safe country once more. They keep bringing up the topic of nepotism. When visiting a certain ministry, we can see nepotism firsthand. Who is running the ministry? It's the wife.
Presidential candidate Gotabaya Rajapaksa later attended another rally organised in Negombo earlier this evening.
I pledge never to allow terrorism and extremism to raise their head in this country ever again. I also wish to reiterate that we will fulfill the Cardinal's request in appointing a presidential commission to find those responsible for these attacks and arrest them.
Meanwhile, presidential contender of the New Democratic Front, Minister Sajid Premadasu, today reiterated some of his common pledges in the campaign trail, namely provision of free fertilizer and a majestic Sri Lanka. Addressing a campaign rally, he also promised to end what he termed the racket of pepper re-exports.
A public rally organised by the New Democratic Front was worked off at the New Town in Laggala this morning under the auspices of its presidential candidate, Minister Sajid Premadasu.
Foreign exchange brought into this country by our women expatriates is the lifeline of this country. No matter how powerful those countries are, with the victory on the 16th, we will link bilateral agreements with them to ensure that our women expatriates enjoy a violence-free working experience. Our government will give free fertilizer to all farmers. I will also implement Samurdhiyan Janasavya. When you make me the national leader, I will ensure a majestic Sri Lanka for all of us. They now claim that prices of fertilizer will be reduced, in fact, free of charge. Why didn't they reduce the prices during their tenure?
Meanwhile, another campaign rally of the NDF was organised in Rattota today.
I promise you that I will not only give a fair and fixed price for minor export crops including pepper, but I will also put an end to the re-export racket of pepper. I will increase the meagre wage of estate workers and will uplift their quality of life. I don't do VIP politics and I will always champion the general public. Strengthen the hands of little Premadasa to serve the little man.
Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe intends to incorporate the country's youth in the decision-making process. Speaking at an event in Colombo today, the Prime Minister also noted that since the country is now an upper-middle economy, the youth must have 13 years of compulsory education, while reiterating the need to create an export-driven economy.
The National Youth Model United Nations 2019 was inaugurated under the auspices of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe in Colombo this morning. The two-day event will allow youth representatives from all 9 provinces to engage and learn the art of diplomacy and conflict resolution.
The youth have to learn, and we all have to learn, that decision making is a collective one. We are facing a world in which the youth want a say. On the other hand, how are you going to take part? Youth having a say doesn't mean only youth contesting elections. So we have to bring the youth into the decision-making process. Some areas we've been successful. In other areas, no. For instance, in most countries, the university students take part in the discussions. Unfortunately, in Ceylon, we have a group that is not interested in taking part in discussion. We are no longer a poor economy. We are an upper middle income economy. So we have to move into the 13 years of compulsory education. If you spend so many years in education, in school education and in your university education, I think you should be entitled to a better job than what many of them are doing now in the divisional secretary's office. So what we have to do in the next 5 years is to convert our economy into an export-oriented economy. And we must earn as much foreign exchange as we require for all the imports we make. If we do that, thereafter we can even have a surplus.
We will now go into a short commercial break. Stay tuned for more local news right after that. Welcome back to the news. The retrial of the case against Brigadier Priyanka Fernando, who was the former defence attaché at the Sri Lankan High Commission in London, commenced yesterday. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs said that during the proceedings, the court heard the private prosecution's case with the prosecution witnesses giving evidence. It said that at the end of the day's hearing, the Chief Magistrate adjourned court until today, when the defence case would be further heard by the court. A warrant was issued for the Brigadier's arrest in January this year, when a private case was brought against him over the certain motions he made to LTTE terror sympathisers during a protest at the Sri Lankan High Commission on Sri Lanka's Day of Independence last year. In February, however, the Chief Magistrate of the Westminster Magistrates Court withdrew the arrest warrant, citing a series of procedural flaws. In its statement, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said that the government of Sri Lanka continues to maintain that Brigadier Fernando, as a diplomat who was attached to the Sri Lankan High Commission in London, is entitled to diplomatic immunity as per the Vienna Convention of the Diplomatic Relations of 1961. It added that the government of the UK has been requested to honour this obligation, which is reciprocal. Sri Lanka is ranked 66 out of 117 countries in the 2019 Global Hunger Index report, which placed the country at the top amongst its regional peers. The report places Sri Lanka among 23 countries that suffers from a level of hunger that is moderate, and drew special attention to the increase in prevalence of wasting in children under 5 years, which has seen an increase this year. According to the Global Hunger Index report, Sri Lanka obtained a score of 17.1 and is ranked 66 out of 117 countries, which is above its regional peers of Bangladesh, Pakistan and India, who ranked 88th, 94th and 102nd respectively. It is, however, noteworthy to mention that the prevalence of wasting in children under 5 years in Sri Lanka has seen an increase from 11.8% in 2010 to 15.1% in 2019. The data further indicates that the country has been able to make progress in the proportion of undernourished in the population, seeing a significant decrease from 11.8% in 2010 to 9% this year. When taking the region, the report goes on to say that South Asia region has one of the highest regional Global Hunger Index 2019 scores in the world at 29.3, driven by its high rates of child undernutrition, rates of child stunting and child wasting. The report also shows that the number of undernourished people in the world is increasing as too many countries are in the midst of violent conflicts that has precipitously increased the hunger levels. Furthermore, extreme weather events are jeopardizing food production and food security and are only expected to increase in number and severity in conjunction with global climate change. Meanwhile, the world's second largest economy, China, and even countries with developed economies like Russia and South Africa too are on the list, although ranked above Sri Lanka. The report, however, does not consider countries in North America, Australia, and several countries in the European continent. According to the agency, GHI scores are not calculated for some high-income countries where the prevalence of hunger is very low. The report, however, stresses that it will take humanity's ingenuity, dedication and perseverance to ensure that zero hunger is collectively achieved while tackling the unprecedented challenge of climate change. Presidential candidate of the movement National People's Power Kumara Dissanayake meanwhile insists that security forces should return the land of people in the north and east along with compensation. The JP leader made his thoughts clear on the topic at the launch of their manifesto ahead of the presidential election.
We will not allow extremist opinions or acts among any ethnic group. Every one of them who talk about security include extremist groups in their political and election campaigns. The National People's Power is the only political platform which will not allow any such extremist opinions. To revive the North and East, we have to include the land issue in our manifesto. All land taken from the people should be returned. Not only return the land, but the security forces should provide them compensation for the time period they occupied the land. There are people in the remand custody for 20 years or so. Even though if they were to be given the maximum sentence for their offence, it'll be 5 years. Is that fair? The process of upholding justice has become unjust. We have suggested that all of them should be released. There are 60,000 war widows who might have lost their spouses and sons fighting for the LTTE. Now, keeping all that aside, aren't they citizens of this country? I remember a compensation program was implemented in this regard, but then some claimed that the LTT cadres are being given compensation. Should we push them back to the same old politics?
Sri Lanka will no longer be subjected to the Financial Action Task Force's monitoring under its ongoing global anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism compliance process. In a statement, the Financial Action Task Force said that Sri Lanka is removed from the grey list of the International Terror Financing Watchdog. It also welcomes Sri Lanka's significant progress in improving its anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism compliance process and notes that Sri Lanka has strengthened the effectiveness of its AML-CFT regime. The body added that the country was able to address technical deficiencies to meet the commitments in its action plan regarding the strategic deficiencies that the Financial Action Task Force identified in November 2017. Sri Lanka was subjected to a review of the International Cooperation Review Group of the Terror Financing Watchdog in October 2016 to assess the progress of AML-CFT effectiveness in the country. Global trade tensions and its impact on economies of G24 nations, which include Sri Lanka, were among the main topics discussed at its meeting held with the International Monetary Fund in Washington recently. Speaking at a media briefing, G24 Chair Julio Velarde cautioned that uncertainty is one of the greatest challenges imposed on economies. Issuing a communique, meanwhile, G24 nations called on the IMF to ensure that its surveillance delivers even-handed and balanced assessments of countries' policy mix, including monetary, fiscal, macro-prudential and structural policies.
The Intergovernmental Group of 24 on International Monetary Affairs and Development held a forum in Washington recently to coordinate the positions of developing countries on international monetary and development finance issues. Representatives from all G24 nations, including Sri Lanka, participated at the meeting. Issuing a communique, the G24 called on policymakers to find the path to constructive dialogue to speedily resolve trade tensions and address concerns in the global governance of trade. They also noted that in view of rising risks and the build-up of vulnerabilities in the global economy, there is a need for a strong quota base and adequately resourced IMF at the center of the global financial safety net and to maintain the current lending capacity of the IMF.
One of the main themes here has been about trade, and I was just wondering if you could comment on sort of the effects that you're seeing from the U.S.-China trade war on your economies. Is it getting worse now that these supply chains are shifting?
You have two effects. One is the trade distortion, the tariffs, which are negative by themselves. But probably the biggest problem is uncertainty, and that is affecting investment, affecting growth. And what is being called by the IMF now synchronized slowdown, in part has to do with these concerns about trade. The managing director gave us a number, how much they believe it is affecting the world economy. You are not investing because the future is not so clear. You can even have a negative rate of interest, but you have still to return the capital that you receive. It's a sort of supply shock that is affecting almost all the countries in the world.
The communique further noted that the G24 called on the IMF to ensure that its surveillance delivers even-handed and balanced assessments of countries' policy mix, including monetary, fiscal, macroprudential and structural policies. Furthermore, they urged the IMF to further integrate macroeconomic and financial analysis in bilateral surveillance to promptly identify and address macroeconomic vulnerabilities.
Sri Lanka recently launched the official website announcing the country's participation in the Expo 2020 Dubai, anticipating a major boost to export tourism and investments while looking to enhance the country's brand value and image globally. Sri Lanka will have its own dedicated pavilion under the theme Island of Ingenuity, which will span over 212 square kilometers at the 6-month-long mega exposition. Sri Lanka will be among 192 countries at the Expo 2020 Dubai, which will be held between the 20th this month to the 10th of April next year. The official website announcing the country's participation at the event was launched in Colombo recently under the auspices of the Ambassador of the UAE, Ahmad Ali Ibrahim Al Mualla. According to the Export Development Board, the UAE government has rendered its support to Sri Lanka by granting concessions worth 1.3 billion rupees, with the provisions of the pavilion free of charge throughout the 6 months and also granting 700 million rupees for its design. 20 sectors have so far confirmed their participation in the Expo 2020 Dubai, representing export services, industrial products and agricultural products. Furthermore, considering the global attention on the event, the EDB announced that veteran Sri Lankan cricketers Mahela Jayawardene and Kumar Sangakkara as well as celebrity chef Peter Kuruvita have been appointed as brand ambassadors for the event.
We are expecting 25 million visitors right through the year. So for tourism, investment and trade, this will be a tremendous boost. The difference is it's not an exhibition, it's an exposition. So we showcase the best of Sri Lanka. There are already 21 chamber associations who are going to partner with the steering committee, and they will be not exhibiting products as such, but we will have a very sophisticated digital presentation of all our products and services.
A little over a year's time, the first World Expo to be held in the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia region will welcome more than 200 participants, including 192 countries, companies, organizations, and education institutions. We are sure that Sri Lanka's participation, focus on innovation in areas such as marine conservation, tourism, and contemporary cuisine will add to the extremes of what visitors can expect to see at the Expo.
We're now going to a short commercial break. Boris Johnson has said he will press on undaunted with his Brexit strategy despite MPs backing the principle of a further delay to the process. The PM vowed to introduce legislation needed to implement his excellent agreement in the Parliament next week, but he will have to ask the EU for an extension beyond the 31st of October after MPs backed a motion designed to rule out a no-deal exit by 322 votes to 306. The EU said it was up to the UK to inform of the next steps. Ministers have signalled that a vote on the PM's revised Brexit agreement could now take place on Monday, depending on what the Speaker decides. During the first Saturday parliamentary sitting for 37 years, MPs delivered a blow to the PM's Brexit strategy. They backed a motion tabled by independent MP Sir Oliver Letwin, which withholds approval for Boris Johnson's Brexit deal until legislation implementing it has been passed. It was due to be followed by a vote on the main government motion whether or not to back the deal. A vote on cross-party amendment on preventing a no-deal referendum and holding a second referendum was also dropped. And with that, we conclude this edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining us and have a pleasant evening.